For this biomaterial that are in contact with the blood, there's a very important aspect, which is a blood clot formation that we call coagulation. And this is a result of cascading chemical reactions of plasma protein, which include clotting factors. And this looks a little complicated, but it's very important. There are multiple Nobel Prizes came out of this blood clot cascade. So this is an example of picture that inside the blood clot, there are fibrin mesh, insoluble meshes formed, which captures or trap red blood cell, and the platelets who made this are activated here so that they form a blood clot. And this is called the coagulation cascade. And as the formation of blood clot is a very well-regulated series of interrelated and enzyme-mediated reactions. Because this is very important for our life to stop bleeding and loss of blood. So you can see there what causes this blood clot. There are two causes. One is intrinsic pathway and the other is extrinsic pathway. Intrinsic pathway is caused by a charged surface, such as exposed extracellular matrix. Usually the blood flows inside a vessel, so that's covered by endothelium. But for some reason, if the endothelium is gone, and then underlying basement membrane, extracellular matrix is being exposed, that can trigger this blood clotting, because that's an indication. In terms of biomaterial point of view, biomaterials, which is direct in contact with the blood, it's known that there are the proteins first adsorb. It covers this biomaterial, and those protein coating will likely to cause intrinsic pathway of blood clot. So that is a big risk. The other extrinsic pathway is activation is coming from tissue injury and resulting vessel damage. Then we have a risk of losing blood and bleeding. So extrinsic pathway is activated and start to run blood clotting. So this is a map of this intrinsic pathway and extrinsic pathway. From the surface, charged surface, there are enzymatic activation. You see small a means activation. And that goes, and extrinsic pathway is coming from vascular injury and tissue factor, and it makes this factor X to activated one. And the point here, important thing is prothrombin become converted into thrombin, and that goes back into the original, which makes a positive feedback that to make this process real, quick, and amplification, so that it makes eventually the soluble fibrinogen into fibrin polymer and cross-linking fibrin polymer, such that these are insoluble and it forms a blood clotting. So you can see this as a multiple well-regulated steps as kind of cascade. So we call it coagulation cascade, which is the formation of blood clot. And I want to show this, the good and bad aspects of this formation of blood clot, which is our intrinsic protection mechanism for our blood, and preventing infections, microorganisms getting into our body. But on the other hand, this clot inside the blood vessel may cause a health issues. So the end point of coagulation cascade is the formation of cross-linked mesh of the protein fibrin. And let's look at these blood clots. So if there's an damage into the vessel, then the tissue activated blood clotting. So you see the platelets and RBCs leaking out, broken blood vessel wall. And in the end, this fibrin mesh will form to trap RBCs, and the platelets are activated and try to block it, and then later on it'll wound healing. So the end point is a formation of the protein fibrin, and the fibrin cross-linking is producing a solid material by trapping red blood cells and platelets within a protein-rich network. And that will closes the area of damage and stops bleeding. So that's very important. This electron microscopic graph shows clearly these fibrin mesh and trapped RBCs, and the platelets are activated. The problem is there are also unwanted formation of clots, such as a formation of clot which will shed as a traveling clot, which we call as an embolus. That can block small vessels, and which can impede blood flow to the tissue and tissue ischemia, and this can lead to, if it ends up into the brain, it can lead to a stroke, or if it ends up lodging into the lungs, it can cause a breathing problems. So let's look at review a little bit. So positive feedback loop due to thrombin and the outcome of the formation of fibrin. Up to now, no biomaterials inert, which is still a big problem for us. And intrinsic pathway is activated by presence of charged surfaces, such as blood contact with the collagen, fibers in the subendothelium. Yes, endothelium is, let's say, exposed. Subendothelium, there's a basement membrane which contains a collagen type 4, or with a biomaterial. So biomaterial can cause an intrinsic pathway of blood clotting, and this requires a number of clotting factors and mineral calcium ions. An extrinsic pathway is activated by a trauma to vascular walls and surrounding tissues, and that clot formation is in response to tissue injury and vessel damage. So next time, we will discuss about implanted biomaterials, which is not directly contact with the blood, that will cause foreign body reaction. Thank you for your attention.